Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Child Welfare Agencies Can Do to Support Reunification, Parent Partnerships, and Reunification Practices. My name is Jay Rajaraman, and I'm new to the ABA team as an Associate Director for Legal Representation Projects here at the Center on Children and the Law. I'm really honored to be here with our partners. In these reunification webinars, most of all, we wanted to celebrate the hard work of parents and children who've gone through the reunification process. It is difficult for most to imagine the incredible efforts that families must mount to overcome poverty, racism, lack of affordable housing, domestic violence, immediate access to resources, and many other challenges that confront families involved with the child welfare system. Consider how those struggles are compounded by the emotionally devastating removal of one's children and the pressure of being under the watchful eye of the agency and courts. We stand in awe of these parents who've gone through Herculean efforts to persevere for the sake of their families and their children. We are honored to share any space with you. These events, the series, will look at what more we can do as a community to better support reunification for parents and their children. What can agencies do better? How can advocates fight for clients inside and outside of the courtroom, including how we can prevent removals, separations in the first place, and expedite the reunification process? For the next 1 hour and 15 minutes, we will hear from Oregon's and Georgia's child welfare agencies on their models, practice, and policies, specifically with resource caregivers and how to better and effectively support reunification. We'll also hear from Jeanette and Casey, parents who are leading the movements in their states and nationwide on making changes for families from the family-led perspective. We also hope for reflections in Q&A. And for those Q&A questions, please add your questions to that Q&A feature. We also will hear about a call to action from our friend Chauncey. I'm so now excited to hand the program over to my friend Chauncey Strong, who has been a change agent for families in reunification. Chauncey?
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us today for the Reunification webinar. Look at that. We have over 386 people here to hear about Reunification Month. So that is truly, truly awesome. I'm so glad that you all decided to join us. My name is Chauncey Strong. I have been involved with child welfare for 30 years. Every time I say it, it's like, oh my gosh, that's a long time to do this work in child welfare. But more recently, I would say in the last 15 or so, I really have started doing some work around reunification. I have my own personal story in child welfare, where I was in foster care, adopted out of the foster care system, went to a loving, wonderful adopted home, and did my own, which you call reunification, but more like search and reunion, and found my biological family many years ago. And I just remember thinking, wouldn't it be great if young people didn't have to get disconnected from their families? And so so people ask me all the time, well, if you were adopted, why are you pushing reunification so much? To me, I think we have to make sure that we push all permanency options for all the children that we have in care, because not one option is going to be right for all the children. And so where we can, and when young people can, they ought to go home, they should go home. And so I'm so glad now that we get an opportunity to share more, talk more about reunification. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of Reunification Month. And this is on the website as well. I've been working in partnership, I got to say this part, in partnership with the ABA, almost 10 years now, to help them as they do their work with Reunification Month. It's really that the month is really about celebrating in June and acknowledging all the people and all the hard work and effort and energy that it goes into helping young people reunify. We do know that in foster care, the first goal is for young people to go home. That is the first goal for all young people in care. And here's a stat that you may or may not know: the majority or more young people go home than not. In other words, in terms of the permanency goals, reunification by far exceeds all the other goals. 47% of the young people last year went actually home that were in foster care, did reunify. So why would we not want to celebrate that and acknowledge all the people who are doing that work? It started out in 2010 as like a day celebration, and a group of caring people, lawyers and attorneys and other people got together in child welfare and just said, why don't we celebrate Reunification Day? And we started out June 19th on 2010, and then in 2012 it moved to the month, and it really spread sort of word of mouth and just putting it out there that we ought to make something around celebrating reunification important. And so we moved to Reunification Month, and we've been celebrating every since then. To be here with you all today. Our theme for today and month for reunification is we believe in the resiliency and strength of families. And what we want to do here is highlight again that the families that we work with are resilient and that they are strong, and that we absolutely believe in the power of young people and the power of families. And once families go home, once children go home and families are reunited, that we ought to celebrate that. So when you go to the website, I'll talk more about that at the end of the program. You'll see all kinds of things. We've got some good information up there for you around reunification. I'm just excited to be with you all today, excited to have this partnership with the ABA. And without any further ado, let's get this.
We may have lost Chauncey. I think our next, if we can hear from Alex and Carrie, feel free to start.
I apologize. I think I lost connection there. So I don't know how much you all heard. But turning it over
We
to
did,
Carrie and
Chauncey. We're going to
Alex.
start. We're ready just to hear from our friends from Oregon.
Sounds good. Sorry.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Or for those on the West Coast, that would be good morning. My name is Alex Trotter, he, him pronouns. I'm the Reunification Program Manager for the Oregon Child Welfare Division, and it's an honor today to share some of the exciting things Oregon has been doing over the last few years. Next slide. In 2020, Oregon implemented the Child Welfare Division Vision for Transformation based on a belief that children do best growing up in their families and communities. It brings racial equity and anti-racism to every aspect of our work and was created in partnership with our workforce, community partners, parents with lived experience, and Oregon tribal nations. The values of the Vision for Transformation frame, inform, and drive our work around family preservation and reunification. Next slide. A key strategy for improving the timeliness and success of reunification is parent engagement. And this includes in Oregon the following: family preservation and prevention work, which we started last year, referring parents to peer mentors early on to engage, motivate, and support parents in navigating the system, holding family engagement meetings that honor the family's culture and are facilitated by trained staff in values-based, family-centered practice. An early transfer process from CPS to permanency that focuses on the family needs and experience instead of the system's needs. Another critical shift has been how we guide and train resource families to develop meaningful and supportive relationships with parents. To talk about this paradigm shift, I'm honored to introduce my colleague, Carrie Mathaler, who has played a critical role in developing our RAFT program curriculum for resource parents.
Thank you, Alex. As Alex said, my name is Carrie Marthaler. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a training development specialist with Oregon Child Welfare. And I'm really honored to be here today to talk to you about all the things that we're doing in the state of Oregon to really support reunification. So in May 2022, we implemented our new resource and adoptive family training curriculum, which we refer to as RAFT, because you know in child welfare, we cannot have too many acronyms. The curriculum comes from the National Training and Development Curriculum, that NTDC, and is based on research and input from experts, including Spalding, the Children's Bureau, Child Trauma Academy, CASE, NACAC, the University of Washington School of Social Work, and more, as well as those with living experience in the child welfare system. We really value the living experience of folks who have been through our system and want to elevate their voices. In addition, we partnered with Oregon tribal nations to review and create content, particularly focusing on cultural awareness and the role of resource families in supporting children's family culture, right? We're not expecting that kids are the ones changing, having to adapt their culture. And as Alex talked about the vision for transformation, that is like a cornerstone, a critical piece of our RAFT training curriculum. And it is woven throughout our entire RAFT curriculum. Starting in session 1, we're letting resource families know upfront what our agency values are and our expectations around maintaining children's family connection. RAFT explicitly states many times throughout the curriculum that ODHS's primary goal is reunification and that foster care is a means to support families. The curriculum talks about the importance of showing respect and compassion for children's parents, asking resource families how they can communicate with parents regularly and with meaning, that parents are the experts on their child. We all know that just because a family is involved with child welfare, that parents still love their children and children love their parents. This language of parents being the experts on their child honors that relationship and reinforces that foster care is a means to support families. One of the goals of RAFT is for resource families to have a spirit of openness and a genuine desire to have a sincere relationship with children's parents. As we know, this benefits everyone involved. An ongoing relationship between parents and resource families after reunification means less loss for children, more support for parents, and continued contact with a child that they love for resource families. It really is a win-win for everyone involved. And then in Oregon, we are so extremely fortunate to partner with parent mentors. And those are parents with living child welfare experience who mentor others who are currently involved in the child welfare system. Our parent mentors collaborated with us in developing our RAFT curriculum, providing valuable insight and feedback. In addition, parent mentors also co-facilitate a theme of RAFT, where they share their living experience with resource families. I just have to say, this is one of the most powerful sessions in all of our RAFT curriculum, where we tend to see the biggest shift in perspective from our families. Hearing from a parent mentor who has overcome the issues that brought them to the attention of the agency brings such hope, optimism, and empathy, and really can lay the groundwork for resource families starting to build a meaningful and supportive relationship with parents. So in addition to helping collaborate and develop our training, and then also co-facilitating a theme, our parent mentors also offer quarterly ongoing training opportunities titled Trauma-Informed Co-Parenting. This is where there's a panel of parent mentors and resource families facilitating open conversation and dialogue about ways to co-parent successfully. So not just showing that it can be done, but that it can be done well. Next slide, please. And then in addition to RAFT and ongoing training, our policies and procedures also support our emphasis on reunification. So our certification standards clearly state certified resource families must work cooperatively with the department to support the case plan and meet the needs of the child by continued contact with family members, siblings, and relatives. And then in addition to our policies, our resource families' ability to support reunification is also thoroughly explored in the Safe Home Study model that Oregon uses to assess and certify resource families. So regarding reunification, we explore, is the prospective resource family respectful towards the child's parent and empathetic to their situation? Is the prospective resource parent able to talk comfortably to a child about their parents and accurately portray the strengths and limitations of a child's parent in a sensitive manner? We're assessing prospective resource families' ability to work collaboratively with parents and support reunification. So we've got kind of this, it's at the front end of training. It's when they're informed about our policies. It happens throughout their home study process. So our families are getting this consistent message all the way along from the beginning of when they start their partnership with us all the way through. And then in addition to these like policies and procedures, there's also been a language shift in all areas of our work, really recognizing that words have power. So we've shifted from foster parent to resource family, highlighting that resource families are a resource to the child and the child's family. It also is an inclusive term because we know that families mean so many different things to so many different people, right? There's so many ways to create a family. And then we've shifted from birth parent to child's parent or child's family, really honoring and acknowledging that relationship between a parent and their child. And then we've also shifted from visitation to family time. Again, just reinforcing that foster care is a means to support families. That is our goal. Reunification is our goal. And all of these pieces come together to just make that message so clear. So the consistent messaging, the clear expectations around supporting reunification, they're paying off in shifts in practice throughout our agency. And I'm so happy to be here to talk to you all about it. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Samantha Walker and Tasia Spooner to hear about the amazing work being done in Georgia.
Thank you so much, Carrie. It's always refreshing to hear about work being done throughout the country to reunify families. My name is Samantha Walker. I serve as the division's reunification director. Here with me today is Tasia Spooner, who is our caregiver recruitment retention unit director and also our kinship director. We also have a partnership parent with us, Kimberly Fowler. So I really want to kind of follow up with what Carrie said about really our values around reunification. So really that's where our work begins is, what do we really believe about reunification? Do we believe that maintaining children with their own families is the preferred permanency option for children that we're involved with? Most children in foster care, we know that reunification with their family is the best option for a permanent home and a loving home, and recognizing that reunification takes work. It takes work for all of us. And so it's important for us to be here today. We're sharing a message because no matter where we sit in our agency, we play a part in reunifying families and making sure that families are safely together whenever possible. So it's not hard for us to make these decisions once we know what our values are. Next slide, please. So how do we support these reunification values outside of just saying we support reunification? Carrie talked about their language shift in Oregon, and so I'm going to speak a little bit about our language shift here in Georgia. So we have partnership parents. If you recall, I just referred to Ms. Fowler as a partnership parent because at the very onset of engagement, we are ensuring that our caregivers recognize their role in supporting reunification and supporting families. We're providing full disclosure that reunification is our primary goal, and we want caregivers and partnership parents to not only believe that, but support that and encourage that. Parent-to-parent meetings have also been a very successful tool in making sure that parents recognize that we're all parents, just at different parts of our lives, so that parents do not they still retain their rights, and we want to provide opportunities for them to continue parenting even when their children are not of home care. So it really just normalizes the relationship between parents to say, hey, I'm Samantha, I'm temporarily caring for your child. Let's work together to achieve the best outcomes for your family. The parent voice has really just been huge for us. And we not only want to hear from parents sporadically, we'd like to have conversations with them via surveys, participating in our annual meetings with our parent advisory council. What are some things that we can do to make sure we are touching parents daily and often in our work, that we're engaging them in this practice and that they are a part of the decision-making as well? family time is something that is extremely important, and we want to make sure that we stay away from the term visitation, which really sounds, it sounds so regimented, but we want parents to continue to have those parenting opportunities. So we want them to continue to participate in doctor's visits, school events, extracurricular activities, homework. We want to normalize that as much as possible and make sure that those connections that children have to their families remain even when they're in out-of-home care. We talked a lot about the responsibility of all of us. And so I'm going to hand it over to Tasia, who's going to talk about what our agency looks like in terms of our standards for our caregivers. So she's going to share some information about that. Tasia? You're on mute, Tasia.
As Georgia shifted to look at our values, as Samantha was able to highlight, and also develop practice and policy to support reunification, we also discovered that knowledge is power about our practice and what it actually entails to carry out our reunification goals. One of the things that became very essential is to ensure that case managers and supervisors are intentional about facilitating the P2P meetings. And that simply means that sometimes we need a script, or we also need to know when those prime opportunities present themselves to make sure that we're introducing caregivers as well as our parents at court visits, to make sure perhaps we are on three-way calls, facilitating and introducing and making those connections between parents and caregivers. But everyone needed support to understand what their role is in facilitating P2P opportunities. The next one was realizing that sharing data with prospective caregivers regarding what it actually means to support reunification, that many of our children enter care in Georgia, and they're actually what we refer to as short stayers. They may stay in care for upwards of 90 days, maybe 6 months. And our goal is reunification. And so those kids are not in foster care for long durations of time. And what they need is a supportive caregiver who's willing to do partnership parenting and support reunification. And then also spending a little time making sure everyone from our foster care team, as well as what we refer to here as our crew team, really is communicating with our caregivers about the reunification timelines. We know that our parents experience a lot of trauma, sometimes setbacks as they're trying to reach their milestones on their case plans, and there might be starts and stops. However, that could convey to a caregiver that perhaps they're on a different journey for permanency. We like to talk about the timeline, so it's very clear that we have guidelines to follow, and we continue to work reunification until it's absolutely not in a child's best interest. The next opportunity that we learned in our practice is that it was important to highlight positive parent and caregiver interactions, both during the placement as well as post-reunification. We want to motivate our caregivers in Georgia to understand that their caregiving is needed and necessary, and it doesn't stop at placement. Post-placement, post-reunification, if we're building an excellent partnership parenting opportunities, we've now built a system of support around the entire family, both the parent, child, and our caregivers. We want to hear more stories like that. We want to highlight more stories like that. Samantha does an awesome job in Georgia under her reunification hat of highlighting this annually and using every opportunity to share practice points with our field when we can to encourage their journey of partnership parenting. And then lastly, we always have to debunk the myths. Sometimes staff, families, caregivers, even the public will have perceptions of parents whose children enter care. And we know that those parents are on a journey, sometimes of their own, that's very complex. But at the heart of all of it, they still love their children and want to make sure that they have opportunities to see them, maintain contacts, also get to understand how to better parent, right? Which we can also learn those strategies during our P2P opportunities. But we have to set that value even with our prospective caregivers, that our parents aren't the scary monsters to be afraid of. Yes, we can have some challenges, but it is through the partnership that we can get the greatest outcomes for children in care. Next slide. So that led us to look similarly, just like Oregon, at our pre-service training, right? It's our key to success, because while we work on our policies and we've set our culture and our values around reunification, we've now got to do some training support with our caregivers to make sure from pre-service training all the way through, we are reinforcing our mission and our goals around reunification. As of October 2021, Georgia had the opportunity to serve as a pilot for the National Training and Development Curriculum, finally known as NTDC. We have not renamed our Georgia curriculum as of yet, but we expect to roll out our new pre-service training model in 2024. What we love most about NTDC is the modules and the themes under expanding families. These modules layer and repeat and reinforce the values around birth families, maintaining connections, and the role for caregivers in doing so, with great examples, great tutorials, great supplemental information to give them as a reference, right? For them when those partnership parenting opportunities present themselves, our caregivers are prepared and well supported to support birth families on that journey. I have a little video, but we won't play it. I'm sure you'll get the opportunity to get the slides, post this training, but I want to make sure you see the NTDC portal. I encourage you all to go out, check it out, because it is a great model that again reinforces our values, and hopefully yours too if you're on the call today, around reunification. And now what we want to do is segue over to our elite parent who is done dynamic things for our agency in helping us to do two things that I think are most important: not only understand and respect parent voice, but to come back and do peer support, and also to help caregivers understand how to partner towards reunification. Next slide.
I'll be brief. So partnership parenting, we all know can be difficult at times. But in all honesty, it's all about the children. So reunification is about the child being where he's comfortable. And as a resource parent in Georgia, I like to work with families and the agency to make sure that both the child and the birth parent, has the resources that they need to be successful in their reunification. Some people don't realize that both children and the birth parents sort of need us as a reference. So it's just good to take that and walk along with these birth parents and these children that have been in our home to provide a successful future with their parents and in their future workplace, school, whatever the case may be.
Thank you so much, Kim. We're going to turn it back over to Jay.
Thank you so much from our friends from Oregon and Georgia, and now excited to hear from Jeanette Vega and Casey Hollinger right after. As you've heard throughout the presentations, we cannot do this work and make true change without listening to parents and children, and without parents and children leading the work. Reunification is not just simply a legal outcome, as Jeanette and Casey and other parents and I've been talking about in preparation for this webinar. It's much more than that. It's not also a reason to say we can remove and look towards reunification later. We're examining what we can do throughout the process for our family. And so as Jeanette shared with me, she said, I'm excited to talk about how we can do no harm and do better every day. So I'm excited to hear from Jeanette.
Thank you so much, Jay. Pleasure to be with you all today. Let me see if we don't have no PowerPoint difficulties. Can everyone see the screen? Yes, thumbs up. Oh, great. Thank you, Chauncey. I was like, I don't see no faces. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all today. And happy Reunification Month to all of the families that reunified this month. I'm Jeanette Vega Brown, a proud Puerto Rican mother raising 4 incredible boys. As the executive director of RISE and a parent who has experienced the child welfare system firsthand, I have devoted my career to working to supporting other families in New York City. With an amazing team of Black and Latin mothers, RISE fights against the injustices that our families face daily. In the communities, families often find themselves surrounded by systems and supports that actually punish, surveil, and traumatize our families. So we're hoping to make some of those changes. Our approach at RISE is pretty simple yet powerful. We have a lot of programs. I won't go through all of the programs. There's a lot of detail about that on our website. Just to give you a run through of like RISE really works where what parents say they need. How do we as systems start to thinking about that being the first priority? Everything is always different. Parents are unique. No parenting parents the same way. So again, where do parents need and what is it they say would benefit their families' lives? The reality of all the families that come into the child welfare system are Black and Brown, Latin, low income families. And a lot of the things you call it neglect in the child welfare system, at RISE, we call it poverty, right? So how do you start to think of all the poverty situations and the community conditions that are driving our families to the child welfare system? And how do we start to prevent those involvements and create more of a network of support and give families the things they need without the removals of their children? And again, at RISE, we have 3 simple concepts and practices that we don't just preach to people to do. We also make sure that we practice through this model so that we're doing what we want other stakeholders and partners to do in their organizations. So our 3 concepts are safety. Are you creating a safe enough space, right? Because nothing is ever safe completely for a parent impacted, but is it a safe enough? Is the language you're using not harming families, right? And I'm also going to share a glossary that we're creating at RISE with language that is harmful to families, especially when you're trying to incorporate parents like us that have the lived experience. The trauma is at a higher level. What does safety look like for you? Self-determination. Are we giving parents information, knowledge, giving them options and choices so that they can elevate their voices? Because we know what's best for our families, and the system sometimes pushes what they think is best for our families. Building relationships, I always say, is key to everything. And this is me and my beautiful baby, my firstborn, Remy. And again, I'm a parent who's 3 years. My son was in foster care. They categorized me as the monster, as one of the other speakers were speaking about. I was the bad parent. I was the monster. That's how I was categorized, right? Why? Because I was Puerto Rican and I hit my son. And in my life and my culture, if you did bad things as a child, you got hit to not do them again, right? And instead of the system trying to support me and guide me as a young new parent, they punished me, right? They traumatized me. They kept me separated from my son for 3 years. And again, a lot of these things are to think about what are the other things that come after a removal? Why are we not thinking about all the other things that happens in the parent's life? And again, all from personal experience on things that happen. Sometimes there's outside stressors that parents go through that agencies and agency staff think it's irrelevant. No one thinks about why these parents are not engaging. One main thing that happens for parents is that they lose their jobs or they have to stop going to school, right? When you have a child welfare case, working part-time school, going to work part-time, had to quit all of those things because I had to do anger management, parenting class, substance abuse, mental health, visit your child, all the appointments with your caseworkers and the preventive agency staff, right? You have to let go of all of your personal priorities to show the agency that your child is the main priority, but you're hurting and you're losing a piece of yourself throughout this process. As I said, most of the families we serve are Black and Brown low income families. And the reality is that most of them are on HRA benefits. So workers are coming to the house checking for food. There is no food, right? The food stamps went down. Parents are getting evicted from their homes after their children are removed. Housing vouchers only qualify you when you have a child in your household. So reunification becomes harder for parents and long lasting. I've had cases where it was 3 to 5 years. An advocate told me yesterday they have a case that's 6 years and they're still working toward reunification, right? Like, how are we thinking about all of these aspects? Why parents ain't complying? Why parents ain't engaging? Because nobody is thinking about all the basic things that they're missing. The main thing they lose is a piece of themselves, right? As a parent, you lose your heart when they take away your child. You don't know how to react, you don't know how to cope, and all you get is anger and rage from us. And that is a feeling. And again, what we're trying to create at Rise through our models and our practices is a different roadmap to reunification. How do we genuinely show love and care to the parents that are going through this traumatic experience of the child welfare system? So we started to learn creating our model. We worked with advocates, parents like myself, and we thought, what were the things that we needed in order to get through this system and it not last 3 years? One thing we trained to say, what are those basic needs? Because if I'm hungry and I'm homeless, I don't care about services. I don't care what you're saying to me, right? So how are we thinking about all of these components in order to really support a parent once the child is in foster care? So we started to think about what are the reunification factors, and people were saying things like visiting, but we're like, no, what are like the components of relationships that get people to engage in order to do the services and engage with the agency in order to reunify in a faster pace? As we said, if I don't feel safe in this, I do not trust you. There's significantly relief. Are my major basic needs being met? Am I being fed today? Do I have a roof over my head? Are we thinking about these things? Relationships are always key to everything, right? If you don't have a relationship, you're not having honest or transparent conversations with people. Self-determination, as I said, options and choices is key to giving parents a voice in child welfare. Not here's a drug program in the Bronx that you should go to, but here's about 2 or 3 of them. Which one would you feel more comfortable going to? Support opportunities to build these skills, which you will see in my 90-day model for the parent advocate work at Rise, where we're also giving our advocates and parents that we work with some basic skills that they're going to use after reunification so that we can avoid re-entry of foster care also. So I'm not going to go through this. I have like 4 minutes. I'm keeping track of my time. But again, this kind of shares all of how the model was created, how we worked with parents like myself who said, these are the things that would guide me to faster reunification. And to think about when other stakeholders in other places want to create a model like this, you have to slow down. You have to think about what is important in this work and how you're actually going to implement parents, because we get tokenized and disrespected all the time in practice. And that is not what real partnership looks like with parents. So we started our model with 2 foster care agencies. We hired 9 advocates, and our long-term scaling this year, after doing 2 years of that pilot with those 2 agencies, is scaling it out into all 24 foster care agencies in New York City. And the amazing part about it is that it actually got incorporated in the contracts in New York City, that this is an implementation that foster care will implement and have parent advocates being the ones doing this work. So we train advocates to really say, you are there to do nothing else but be there for the parent. And agency staff sometimes does not understand that I can have a whole 8 hours of just being with the parent, venting, talking, discussing the case, making sure they understand the process and the structure and how they can have some information to help them navigate. So to run through the model, and again, I can share these slides and each practice of these 90-day model processes. I have one that says like initial call and the detail of what best practice will look like. But it's just, are you calling the parent that first day that you get that intake that their children are removed and placed in foster care? Hi, my name is Jeanette. I'm the parent advocate. Here's my role. You're about to have a transitional conference, a parent to parent. The visits for your child is going to happen all in this next week. Here's what all these things mean. Here's all the parties who are going to be in these meetings, right? Advocate attends the transitional conference. attends the parent to parent, so that the parent is understanding exactly what is happening. These things happen so fast for parents in the beginning. And again, with all of those basic things in their life that they're losing, we're not thinking straight. We're not listening or hearing, but we are saying yes to everything you say because we think that's what's going to get our children home. So our advocates support them with understanding visits. We have 4 handouts to implement the RISE visiting tips. How do you give parents information what a beneficial visit will look like, right? Agency says engage and bond. What does that look like in a foster care agency? The 30 to 90-day practices after you've gotten some relationship with this parent as an advocate, your role is to keep doing some of the things that will help them never come back. Standing up to shame, survival skills. Are you talking to this parent about the reality of what they may be feeling? Foster care never cares about how people feel, right? But the parent is feeling a lot at this moment through all of these processes. Are you talking to them? You're asking someone to change their negative coping skills, whatever the allegation is, to something positive. Are you giving them suggestions to actually shift that, right? You can't just take off somebody's band-aid and expect them to stop bleeding. You have to figure out how to patch it up a little. We give them negotiation skills so that they are prepared for the family team conference, which happens usually every, I want to say 3 months in foster care. That's my alarm telling me like, wrap it up, Jeanette. So it happens every 3 months in foster care, and we prepare our parents to negotiate to move the case forward faster. Some challenges that will happen is splitting. Vicarious trauma for parent advocates is real, and making sure that everyone understands the advocates' roles and other agency staff roles so there's no complications. And I will go through those. You can see all of these amazing caseworkers, advocates sharing their experiences of what it's like and how it is different how we engage parents in foster care. And what we're trying to do is change dynamics. This is what it's like now. And after 20 years of having a case, I can tell you this is still what it is like now. Parents are fearful, they're angry, the agency's judging, assuming, right? And we are avoiding you. We want, through our model at RISE and all of our different programs of peer support, parent advocacy, to learn together. Let's think about how do we share this power with parents so that they can be their own voice for their family. The person is not the problem, the situation and the allegation that got the parents into foster care. So how are we being more curious and open? And I always say at RISE, please don't share my material unless you are inviting parents to read RISE's materials. And again, always communicating that RISE's materials came from parents who've been impacted, and we are speaking from personal experience to guide and support families. And we can flourish and grow so much faster without child welfare and never returning when people are actually supported and guided with love and care. And I always love to end my presentation showing my amazing family because, as I said, I had a case 20 years ago, never again, because I've learned to build my networks of support so that I can get the things I needed from my family to not get that intervention. And we hope that today's presentation throughout the whole thing makes you take time to talk with parents. Be mindful that trauma is real. Remember that parents have a lot of feelings going on, especially in the beginning of these cases. And I want you to challenge others to also fight for families' rights and always stay connected with RISE. We are always welcome to support, engage, and help people implement our models in other places outside of New York and in New York City. So thank you all so much for listening to A Parent's Perspective. And I will pass it over to our other parent, Casey.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. I love hearing about all the work you guys are doing to champion the parent voice. My name is Casey. I am out of Oregon. I'm a mom in long-term recovery since 2009. I have 3 beautiful children, and I have worked as a parent mentor with an organization called Morrison Child and Family Services on and off since 2014. I've had a couple babies and taken some breaks in between there. I also am a person with lived experience in the child welfare system. And I participate in our Oregon Parent Advisory Council, which is a council of parents with lived experience who get to advise and give perspective to the leadership of child welfare in our state, and also give them firsthand accounts of the things that we are seeing that are going great and maybe need some improvement throughout our different counties in Oregon. And I also co-facilitate a group called the Incarcerated Parents Work Group, and we are working to affect change on how folks who are incarcerated get to engage with the child welfare system and have access to their families. So I'm going to start off with just sharing a little bit of my story. I think it helps to give some context about where I'm coming from. It will be a really condensed version with a high focus on the relationship that I had with my own son's foster mother. We are calling them resource families in Oregon now, which is a great change, but at the time she was his foster mom. So pardon me if I use those terms interchangeably. I really didn't start my drug use until later in life. I actually was a family placement resource for my nephew. My own family were foster parents, and statistically speaking, I didn't start my drug use until much later compared to most folks. I became a heroin addict at the age of 25. And really struggled with codependent relationships, abusive relationships, and trying to get myself off of heroin. I was introduced to methamphetamine. I used that for about 6 months, and that ended with a series of arrests for me. I had never been in trouble with the law, and I had a few arrests in a really short period of time. And at my final arrest, during the intake process in my county jail, I found out that I was pregnant. I was just barely like 4 or 5 weeks pregnant. I did not anticipate that I would be able to have children. And so it was really a catalyst for me for change. It was one of the most bittersweet experiences that I've ever had. With that was a really shameful phone call to my family saying, hey, I'm looking at prison time and I'm also pregnant. And I say that because I think that the shame that us parents and the guilt that we have sometimes gets forgotten, and the system can turn really punitive, and they forget that really we're doing much worse to ourselves than anybody else could possibly do mentally. So I ended up getting a 24-month sentence to a state correctional facility. And I remember as I was going through my plea bargain deals with my attorney, I remember her saying to me, you know, you really need to start looking at adoption options for that baby. Like, you're not going to be a parenting resource. 24 months is too long for you to be able to get your baby back. And I feel like my story is a lot of these really small but super impactful moments that just kind of lit a fire for me. I looked at her and was like, that's not gonna happen. That's not an option for me. So I got to prison, and I was really hoping to get inpatient treatment. They had a 6-month intensive inpatient treatment program there, and I was really hoping to be able to get that program because it would mean that I would get out of prison early, and if I completed successfully, and be able to be a parenting resource for my son. I was able to advocate for myself and get into that program. And that really was important for me because it gave me access to family, to resources. I did not have any money on my books. I didn't have people coming to visit me. You know, in the choices that I had been making previously to being incarcerated, I had burned a lot of bridges. So getting into that program was really helpful. I was able to really focus on myself and also planning what's going to happen when this baby comes. This was my first child. I would be giving birth, to my first child completely alone. I knew that my child would be going into the child welfare system because I had nobody to care for him. And I remember calling the child welfare office and saying, I want to talk to somebody. My son's about to go into care and I want to know what it's going to look like. And they were like, sorry, we can't help you because your child's not in care yet. And that was that. I didn't have a lot of opportunity for phone calls. I had no access to the internet. So it was just a wait and see thing for me. I ended up giving birth to my son. And I had decided that I wanted to nurse him. I worked with the head of Washington County WIC, the county that I was in, to get a breast pump brought into, the facility for me. And I was able to nurse him directly after birth. Because I was nursing, I think the nurses at the hospital took a little pity on me and kept me with my baby for 43 hours. I counted every single one of them. Most of the women who give birth while they're incarcerated, at least in my state, spend about 16 hours with their baby, and they are taken back to a facility to recover in the infirmary there. And that mattered. It mattered in a really big way, only because it was bonding time between my son and I, but also because I stayed there so long. When it was time for us to be checked out, my son's foster mom came to pick him up. It just so happened that they didn't have a caseworker who was able to do it. And she was a seasoned foster mom, and she offered to come in and get the baby. And it was probably the most impactful piece of that moment, because, my biggest fear as a parent was, is somebody going to try and take this baby? There is a culture of folks using the child welfare system as a low-cost adoption option, and folks know. And I was just terrified that I was going to have to not only be fighting my own demons and clawing myself out of this hole that I had dug for myself, but also I'm going to be fighting this other person who had more money, more experience, and more clout than I did for my baby. And that wasn't the case for me. And she was kind and generous, and she allowed me to dress my baby, put him in a car seat, all of these really small things that matter. She did not take that power away from me and take my baby and start doing all of these things that me as a parent should be and want to be doing. And throughout our case, she was really helpful in that way. And there were some bumps in the road for us, nursing my baby on visits, and him living far away from the facility. There were, bumps in the road. He was fussy in the car. My, milk was different than the formula that he had to start on. I am grateful that through those bumps, we were able to talk about things, work together. She sent a journal back and forth in his diaper bag so that we could communicate about what was happening with him. We built that relationship through the struggles and challenges. We worked with a lactation consultant that visited both of us and was able to really help us to figure out the issues that we were having. And because we had worked hard on these small steps in building our relationship, when I got released from prison, she was there the next day, brought my baby to see me, took me shopping for some baby items, really encouraged and supported our relationship. She went, above and beyond what I had expected. She eventually allowed me to come into her home and visit with my son, see where he had been sleeping, see what their daily routine was like. She really wanted to help me to be successful. And because of that, she was able to write an email to my caseworker and say, look, these are the amazing things that I'm seeing with this mom. And I really feel like she's ready for reunification. And I think that that matters. You know, when we're talking about what child welfare as an organization can be doing to support reunification, I think that being a part of that relationship, I had no contact with my caseworker while I was incarcerated. It wasn't until I got out that I even knew who she was. And I think that caseworkers being able to be a part of the trifecta, right? Like caseworker, resource family, birth family, really participating in what does that relationship look like. I was really lucky. My case was 12 years ago. So there has been a lot of changes in Oregon since then that I'm really grateful to have been a part of. Because I know how impactful the relationship with my son's resource mom was to my success. So, you know, I think that one of the biggest challenges for caseworkers is a shortage of foster homes in our state. I think because of the shortage of reliable resource families who are willing to take in children, there's this pressure to really placate and keep them happy, right? Like, let's not lose these foster families. And so caseworkers are really trying to play this delicate dance with resource families and birth families. And because of that, resource families can end up kind of guiding a case. They're offering feedback about what they're seeing. And if their intentions are not purely reunification because they are wanting to use the system as a low-cost adoption option, it can really muddy the waters. And, you know, I think that when there's a culture that child welfare has had for the last 20 to 30 years of like saving the children, and I'm seeing Jay, so that must mean I'm running out of time. When there's a culture of saving the children, that essentially means saving the children from their parents. And that is something that Oregon is really trying to get away from. I think with the RAF trainings that Carrie talked about, we've seen a really big difference in starting from the beginning when recruiting and training these resource families, and really pushing more than you think you should, the issue of reunification being the first and number one goal for these families. And I think that that makes a really big difference in all of these ripple effects of folks realizing that child welfare is not a low-cost adoption route, and that really we should be focusing on the trifecta of child welfare, resource families, and birth families all working together for the same goal, which is reunification. So with that, I will stop. Thank you, Jay, for the reminder.
Yeah, well, thank you. No, well, Casey, stay on. And I also welcome back the rest of the panelists. And I think we have literally just a few minutes. And Casey, I could listen to you all day, so it was hard for me to jump on. And thank you so much for being vulnerable and honest, just incredible. But I just want to share with the audience that our hope is to respond to your questions, as Chauncey noted, some way after the webinar. But there was a repeated question that came through the thread of our questions about these shifts in programs and changes in language, going from foster parent to resource parent, and whether that affected, Casey, to your point, whether that affected the relationship or the quality of resource parents and the recruitment of resource parents. So I wanted to open it up. And Casey, feel free if you wanted to address it. And then I was hoping to hear from Carrie and Sam from the Oregon and Georgia team about this.
Yeah, I mean, so I was a little long-winded with my story, but really I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen in Oregon is that for a while, we have been really working on including parent voice in so many things. And I think that we're really grateful for that. And before RAF trainings, we had foundations trainings, and us as parents got to share our story and kind of put a face to these experiences and show that change is possible. And that was great. It helped to kind of build some empathy for us. And I think that it still didn't fix the issue of folks who would be very clearly open about wanting to use the foster care system as a route to adoption. And I think that what the RAF trainings have done is really say, like, wait a second, if that's what you're in this for, just realize that reunification is the #1 goal, and that may not happen for you for a very long time. So be prepared to love these children and support these families, because that really is what this is all about. And so
Thank you, Casey. Anyone else? It sounds like we're stopping pitting parents against resource caregivers. That's a huge change. Sam, Carrie, Alex, Jeanette.
The
Yeah,
only thing I would add, oh, Sam, you go ahead.
I think I would just add that it has not been easy. So it's definitely a challenge shifting toward that and being very honest and providing that full disclosure to caregivers. I will say what has been helpful to us is to hear from actual partnership parents about how this works and how this can be successful, right? So we have an obligation as an agency to say, hey, here's what we're looking for when recruiting caregivers. We want partnership parents. We want people to partner because reunification is the goal. And here is our expectation as an agency, right? But it's something different to talk to a caregiver who's actually doing it and can share some, I know you might be feeling ambivalent and there's some hesitation here. Let's talk through that. Let me talk about my experience. So that's been definitely helpful for us. I'm sure Tasia can shed some light on it from her perspective, but it's definitely something that certainly takes time, but it is helpful when everybody is on board and we have the caregivers, the partnership parents, everybody saying the same thing and relaying that same message.
I thought the question was really timely. We looked at some recent data here in Georgia. For the month of April, we had about 430 something prospective applicants who self-identified their interest in partnership parenting. The goal is to keep them interested and to keep them motivated. And that's what the pre-service training, along with these opportunities for peer support, does. Because the reality of the caregiving, especially over a long reunification journey, is where I think the hurdles come up for caregivers. And so we want to keep reinforcing that. And that's the opportunity of your pre-service training, as well as these other strategies we've highlighted so well today.
And then Jay, the only other thing that I would add is, I think that with this language shift, it's about being transparent with folks as they're coming through the door. We're being so honest, transparent, upfront about the ask, right? These are our values. This is our ask of you. And then families get to decide, can I do that or can I not, right? So when we say foster parent, it's this broad kind of, we have an idea of what that means. But when we're saying, we want you to be a resource family, not just to kids, but to kids and their families. Can you do that? Yes or no? So that transparency and using accurate language, I think, is so critical.
Absolutely. I think what Casey shared is that resource caregivers may look different, may feel different because of your honesty, Carrie, the transparency, what's required. But if they go in knowing this, it's another way to achieve permanency for this family with the parent involved day one. And that's incredibly exciting. Another question that came through a lot was the concept of visitation and family time. And so I was hoping to just ask Jeanette, like, what have you seen through RISE and through your experience, and then open it up about changing the way we look about that function, that service, that need for families?
I mean, I think family time was the new language that was used to describe visiting time with your children. And I think, again, the system tries to like give nice language to things that are still harmful and traumatizing. So I think it's important that we don't just change language, but we change the culture and the practices within the agencies also. At RISE, we call them a 2x4 jail cell, right? You got people surveilling you. It's very similar to jail. You got people watching you, telling you what to do and what you're not doing with your kids. Usually they're telling you what you're doing bad and they report that. But again, no one is ever giving you direct guidance to say, why don't we do these things? Or if there's a court order that says you're not supposed to be on your phone and this is what engagement looks like with a child, we play with our children differently in so many different forms. Like when I had my case, I used to go in and be like, let's play football and let's throw the bat. And the agency's like, you can't do that. Have my son jumping on the sofa and they're like, well, you can't, you're not even disciplining, right? So I think parents, especially corporal punishment case, they are scared to discipline their children in visits. So how are we supporting them? Because if they don't discipline in visits, weekends, community visits, all that is going to be even more difficult because now you don't have no structure. Weekend visits become like fun family time. I got my baby for the weekend. I'm going to give you all these great things and have so much fun. But then when reunification happens, it's not fun time anymore. It's real life parenting. And how do you start to shift and make those dynamics within the system during family time so that we can have better outcomes of reunification?
That's a really good, I really like what you said about that, Jeanette, because we try very, very hard not to have standard visitation in that way because it just doesn't feel good and it's not natural. It's just not natural to do that. So really family time should occur in the home in which the child should be returning to. Visits in the family time in the community, in the partnership parent's home, to make it more like just real life and not a visit that we're checking a box and we're making sure that a parent has had a visit for the month, the siblings have visited. No, that we're really creating opportunities for parents to continue to parent and creating opportunities for families still to be together, still to do typical family things, even though their child is, in foster care in the child welfare system.
Yeah, and I would add in, I think I was just adding, I think COVID gave us a lot of different options.
Yes.
Right. COVID had us in New York City, especially, we had like foster parents and parents calling the children early in the morning to say good morning, after schools to check in on them, at night to say good night. Like there are practices that we've learned throughout COVID that do enhance family time together. And how do we implement those as we go forward also, right? Casey, sorry.
That's okay. I was just going to say that I think so in Oregon, as a rule, generally parents, we try to get one visit a week, right? And I know that parents are really grateful for that time and they look forward to it, but I just want to say that like more is more. And we know that when there is an attachment that is broken, which happens when families are separated, period, no matter what age, but specifically younger children, that has a big and long-lasting impact. So the more time that these parents can get with them, the more motivated they are to make those changes that need to be made, and the better these children are in the future and currently. And I think that making a shift to when are the situations appropriate for parents to really be monitored behind glass. Does every case need that? No, they really don't. And relying on community partners, these resource families, teachers, other people to really just be aware of, child safety is really impactful, and making a switch to like which families really do need that, because what I see is that most families start out that way, period, as just as a rule. And I think that it's not always necessary.
Casey, thank you for closing this out. And on that note, what we've learned from parents often, if sometimes parents can't go to family time or visits because it's so traumatic, because all they can think about is it's a removal after an hour or 2 hours once a week, right? So they feel like it's not there is a supportive service, right? It's there to sort of supervise, like they said. And Samantha, I just loved what you said earlier when you said it's got to be more than language change. And Jeanette just echoed that. It's about action and service. And I think we really heard some incredible tools that have been put into action to really support reunification from the parent and child's perspective today. So with that, like I said, we're going to try our best to respond to everyone's questions in the Q&A. So please hold post-webinar through email. But at this point, I would like to hand it back to Chauncey to close us out.
Hey, real quick, everybody stay on if you don't mind. Can we give in the reaction some hand claps, some appreciation to all the panelists? This was an excellent webinar. especially to our parents. We thank everybody, right? The professionals do. But boy, when these parents start talking, man, you all start talking about their cases and the things that has happened. Look at that, the reaction just lighting up here. You all are awesome, and thank you so much for your willingness to share to help us improve the system. In my last 3 minutes here, we're going to do a couple of call to action. First of all, thank you all for attending. Look here, you see that the next webinar is going to be on June 29th. This is going to be another excellent webinar. We're moving to look at the Quality Improvement Center on reunification, and listening to the folks from Ohio, Kentucky, Montana, and New York about the reunification work that they're doing. So please stay tuned for the registration link for that. That's our next event that's happening. Look, the next thing is keep sending us information about reunification and what's happening in reunification. Curtis has just put the link in the chat here. If you want to share information, send it to either Beverly or myself. You see our email addresses. We already have 14 states that have already shared different things that they're doing. And so you can go to the website, you can find that. But if you want to know specifically, if you send me an email, I send out updates weekly now. I'm going to send out weekly updates about reunification. 14 states already, tons of proclamations from individual states. So I'm so excited that people are celebrating and moving forward with Reunification Month. So send us your information there. Look, Candice, Prudence, if you want to, we're going to also put in this awesome reunification toolkit that was developed with our partnership with Rally. And so that's another great resource that's going to be on the website. We're going to put a link that you can have access to that so you can see the social media toolkit on reunification. And then certainly last but not least, we have these reunification heroes. Yay, we've got I don't know if it's okay. I'm going to say we may share up to 50 reunification heroes coming up, and we're going to have it laid out by state so you can see where your state is. We're so excited that that's coming online for us very soon. So stay tuned. If you're interested, again, send us the email, put it in the chat. I'm going to send a little note here. You can put it in chat so that you can continue to be updated on what's happening on Reunification Month. And again, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much for your interest. We got up to about 400 and some odd people for Reunification Month for this webinar. So we really appreciate that. I didn't know if I was closing us out, Jay, but I can, but I'm turning it over to you.
That's it, my friend. You did an excellent job. Thank you again to everyone here on our panel, and excited to see everyone on our next webinar on June 29th. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Awesome. Panelists, would you go stay on for a quick debrief? And thank you all so much, everybody. Excellent job on this webinar. Again, if you're still interested, put in your email address in the question and answers, or send me an email directly. And please keep sending us your reunification events. Jay, also awesome job facilitating this. Thank you so much. Great job.